The Seven Research Center, a marvel of human ingenuity, was a steel and glass sanctuary nestled in the desolate, frozen landscape of the Arctic. It was a place of stark beauty and profound solitude, a perfect crucible for the team of 4 scientists dedicated to the search for extraterrestrial life. Their isolation was absolute. The nearest human settlement was over 1,500 miles away, and their only connection to the outside world was a satellite uplink. The team had been at the facility for exactly 76 days, their lives governed by the rhythmic hum of machinery and the relentless, silent snowfall outside. At the heart of the project was Dr. Adrian Finch, a brilliant astrophysicist whose personal life was as cold and empty as the world outside. 10 years ago, his wife, Sarah, had died in a car crash he felt responsible for. He had been so consumed by his work, so focused on the stars, that he had missed her calls on that fateful night. The guilt was a constant companion, a silent weight he carried into the silence of space. His team was a collection of equally brilliant, equally haunted minds. Lily, the telecommunications expert, was only 25 but carried the burden of her younger sister's death, a tragedy she was unable to prevent. Marcus, the cyberneticist, was a man of logic and reason, but he was tormented by his last, bitter argument with his father, who had died just a month later. And Jack, the grizzled technician, harbored a secret from his military past, a moment of cowardice that had cost others their lives. They were all there to escape something, to bury their earthly regrets in the vastness of the cosmos. The monotony was shattered at 3:17 on the 77th day. Adrian sat alone, watching a star chart, when an alarm blared across his console. A signal was incoming, an electromagnetic wave unlike anything they had ever detected. It wasn't a natural cosmic pulse. It was a structured, complex message, its origin traced to a point far beyond their known universe. The signal's signature was a fractal pattern, a beautiful but alien tapestry of data that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Adrian, a man of science, felt an uncharacteristic tremor of dread as he stared at the screen. He knew instinctively that this was not a simple radio wave. This was something ancient, something intelligent, and something that had been waiting for them to find it. The team gathered in the main lab, their collective excitement masking a growing unease. Lily, her fingers flying across the console, tried to pin down the signal's source. Her terminal, however, simply flashed a blank origin, unknown. Marcus, meanwhile, worked to crack the code. The signal wasn't a language in the traditional sense, but a series of rhythmic pulses that seemed to mimic the electrical firings of a human brain. He theorized that it was not meant to be read, but felt. It was a biological, not a linguistic message. For the next 17 days, the team worked relentlessly. Adrian, in his soundproof observation chamber, listened to the signal through specialized headphones. He began to feel its effects almost immediately. The first changes were subtle. He would see a flicker of Sarah's face in the reflection of the glass, a phantom touch on his shoulder. He dismissed it as a side effect of the relentless strain. But soon, the others began to experience similar phenomena. Lily, while working on the signal's waveform, started hearing a child's laughter in the empty corridors. She saw her sister, a small figure in a white dress, playing in the corner of her lab. The vision was so vivid, so real, that she would stop her work and reach out, only to find nothing. The ghost of her sister would turn, her eyes sad and accusing, and whisper, "You could have saved me, Lily." Marcus began to argue with the ghost of his own. He would see his deceased father sitting at the table in the mess hall, his face etched with disappointment. The phantom father would speak, his voice a low, resentful growl. "You chose your machines over your family. You chose this cold, dead place over me." The arguments became louder, more violent. The other team members could only see Marcus shouting at an empty chair. Jack, the gruff and stoic technician, was the worst affected. His past, a memory he had buried for 20 years, began to surface. He would see the faces of the soldiers who died under his command, their mouths open in silent screams. The guilt was so overwhelming that he started sleeping with a knife under his pillow, convinced they were coming for him. Adrian, witnessing their decline, began to piece together the terrifying nature of the signal. It wasn't a form of communication. It was a parasitic organism, a mental virus. It didn't just carry information. It carried a consciousness that fed on human regret. It was a mental parasite, a being that turned a person's deepest fears into their reality. The signal was a broadcast of pure, unadulterated trauma. The very act of deciphering it was an invitation for the parasite to enter their minds and feast on their deepest sorrows. The A7 Center, once a haven of scientific discovery, had become a psychological prison. The team, once a united front, was now a group of isolated, terrified individuals. The signal had turned them against each other, using their pasts as a weapon. Adrian watched from his observation room, his heart a stone in his chest. His own haunting by Sarah was becoming more aggressive. She no longer just appeared. She would touch him, her hands cold as ice. She would whisper cruel, vindictive words that chipped away at his sanity. "You chose your work over me," she would hiss. "Now, you are paying the price." Marcus, now completely unhinged, was convinced that the rest of the team was a figment of his imagination. He would lock doors and shut off systems, trying to trap the phantoms of his father and the rest of the crew. His once brilliant mind was now a chaotic mess of circuits and self-destructive paranoia. He saw Adrian as a malevolent spirit, an extension of the parasite's will. Lily, tormented by her sister, was lured into the reactor room, where the child's voice echoed off the walls. She was convinced her sister was trapped inside the core, and she tried to reach her. Jack, meanwhile, was in the armory, convinced the ghosts of his fellow soldiers were trying to get in. He was a ticking time bomb, waiting for a chance to fight back. The facility's power systems, under Marcus's chaotic control, began to fail. The lights flickered, the temperature dropped, and the satellite uplink, their only connection to the world, went dead. The isolation was no longer a choice. It was a prison. Adrian, the only one left with the semblance of his mind, knew he had to act. The signal was amplifying itself, its presence now a physical force, a tangible weight of dread and despair. He knew that the parasite was using their minds as a battery, drawing power from their pain to become stronger. He had to sever the connection, to kill the signal at its source. Adrian, fighting off the chilling caresses of Sarah's phantom, made his way to the sublevel where the main generator was housed. The corridors were a nightmare. The walls seemed to breathe, and the sound of his team's screams echoed around him. He saw Marcus, still arguing with an empty chair, his face a mask of furious delusion. He saw Lily, hunched over the reactor core, her body trembling with grief. He saw Jack, crouched behind a pile of equipment, his eyes darting wildly. They were all gone, consumed by the parasite. He reached the main generator room. The air was thick with a palpable dread. The generator, its wires glowing with an unnatural energy, was where the signal was being amplified. He saw the source of the parasite's power, a small, strange device attached to the generator's core. It was the heart of the mental parasite, drawing on the negative energy of the team to sustain itself. As he reached for the device, Jack lunged at him, a wild animal with a crazed look in his eyes. He wasn't Jack anymore. He was a vessel for the parasite, a puppet controlled by his guilt. Adrian fought back, a desperate, clumsy struggle. He managed to push Jack away, but not before Jack stabbed him in the arm, a searing pain that brought him back to reality. He crawled towards the generator, ignoring the bleeding wound. As he did, Sarah's voice, now a deafening roar in his mind, filled the room. "You failed me. You failed them. You can't even save yourself now." The voices of Lily, Marcus, and Jack joined in, a cacophony of their regrets and screams. He reached the device, his fingers trembling. He had to rip it out. He felt a moment of pure clarity, a brief instant where he saw the signal for what it was: a cosmic predator, a lonely entity that had finally found a home in the sorrow of humanity. With a final, desperate surge of will, he reached for the device and ripped it from its housing. The room was filled with a blinding white light. A piercing, agonizing shriek filled the air, a sound of pure pain and defeat that was not human. The light dissipated, and the silence returned, a silence heavier and more profound than before. Adrian lay on the floor, the blood seeping from his arm. The voices had stopped. The